Welcome to another episode of Come Together. Should take a second. Dr. Nadler, welcome. Welcome back to another episode. I really appreciate you coming. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
It's so funny. You were just telling me that the audio, you had to correct it. I recorded a full hour and a half, phenomenal conversation with a gentleman from Australia that was actually doing a little bit of research with LSD and microdosing to cure depression and suicidal ideation. And we recorded a phenomenal episode. And I thought I heard like a echo, at the beginning, and it's happened once before, and then it was totally fine. So I just like, oh, I'm sure it's fine. And after a full hour and a half, I listened back, and I'm like, I can't use this. And it was such a shame. I have to record part two with him.
And Riverside can't. It doesn't like
Clean that
filter
up?
out or
No, I
something.
tried running it through AI. I have a couple of buddies that pay for, I guess
Other stuff,
more
yeah.
potential or, higher capabilities, and they ran it through, and it was because apparently it was a separate. The Riverside was recording my input and then re-recording the output on his end, so everything was heard twice. But welcome to the show. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm
Yeah,
happy
well,
we made this happen.
everybody needs a show on how to podcast. You know what I mean?
That's right. By the way, I've been learning that as throughout the last year and change is, I mean, it's a lot of learning lessons, but the truth is not to overthink it. That's what I found. Don't overthink it. Pick it up when you can, and if it's a bad episode, it's or not as good as you could make it. It's not as good as you can make it. Move on to the next one.
Right.
So you specialize in obesity, pediatric obesity,
Correct.
particularly.
Correct. I'm a pediatric surgeon by training, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And when even before my formal pediatric surgery training, I had this sort of epiphany moment where I decided someone needed to do something about the obesity epidemic in the United States, especially for
What
kids.
year was this? Or around what year?
You're going to date me, and you're also going to test my memory. But I think, I've told the story a few times, and so to be consistent with the story I tell each time,
Yeah.
say in the year 2000.
Okay. Was obesity an epidemic at that point already?
So, depending on who you ask, it's been around for 50 years, but we as a society didn't really recognize it. And my epiphany moment was actually at the Dolphin and Swan Hotel in Orlando, in Disney.
Sure.
I think I was at the Swan. But the pool was shared between the two hotels, and I was sitting at the pool at a pediatric surgery meeting, actually, where I was going to present my data on something completely unrelated to obesity. And I'm there with my wife, and although I guess at that time, we got married in 2001, so at that time she was not my wife yet. And we're sitting at the pool, and across the pool I see, and by the way, this is like May, or maybe even Memorial Day weekend, and it's like hot. Hot.
Yeah, Orlando's miserable this time of year, or that time of year, yeah.
Yeah, and or all times of year, but but that's a different story. So I'm at the pool, and across the pool, first of all, everybody at the pool is struggling with weight issues, and the epiphany, or the kid that caught my eye, and I certainly don't want to stigmatize this kid, although this was in 2000, so he probably will have no recollection of even if he knew I was talking about him, he would have no recollection.
Mm-hmm.
But he's probably about 12, clearly struggling with his weight. He had a big old greasy hamburger, giant hamburger, a 2-liter bottle of Coke, sugar Coke, and a 1-pound bag of Lay's potato chips. And I can still see the grease dripping down his arm. And I was like, this is crazy. Like, how can we, what's going on here? And, so that led to my pediatric surgery training, where in 2004, I actually did my first pediatric bariatric surgery operation as part of a group of pediatric surgeons who were starting to explore it at the time. And, I just thought surgery was never going to be the cure at a population level, but certainly people benefit from it. But I thought that maybe the lessons learned from surgery, like if we could figure out how surgery works, maybe we could come up with medications, maybe we could come up with other interventions that could mimic surgery, which frankly, 20 years later, we actually haven't really, or 20 years later, we haven't really gotten there yet.
I was
Although,
going to ask, what was
yeah,
what were the methods at the time? If you were at 20 in the year 20, I guess in the year 2000, someone's like, okay, you need to lose some weight. What do you do?
yeah.
I mean, what would you tell someone at that point?
Right. It's the same sort of basic stuff that's being talked about today, and frankly, it's the same basic stuff that the fitness gurus of the 50s and 60s. Jack LaLanne, I like to bring him up, but no one has any idea who Jack LaLanne is anymore. But he was he was America's original fitness guru in the 1950s, and it was diet and exercise. And
Mm-hmm.
75 years later, RFK is talking about diet and exercise. I mean, it's like,
Yeah.
it's incredible to me that we haven't moved past that conversation. I mean, I get it because so I do videos for like TikTok and other things where I'm in a grocery store and I'm showing people what they should and shouldn't eat. So yeah, everybody should eat better and everybody should exercise if they have the time, no doubt. I'm totally in favor of all that stuff. But to think that that's going to cure the 140 million Americans who suffer from obesity and the 15 million children who have obesity, if you think that diet and exercise is going to fix them, then you just haven't been paying attention, because there are boatloads of data, hundreds of studies in the medical literature showing that the diet and exercise programs, even at their best, even if it's like super intensive, even if it's like The Biggest Loser, which, by the way, there's a Netflix documentary that's exposing all of the bad things that were going on behind the scenes. I haven't seen it yet.
At that point in entertainment history, there was bad things going on behind the scenes everywhere you looked.
Yeah,
I mean, you
yeah.
could not catch a break from that point in time.
Right, and there are
Seriously.
actually now a bunch of great documentaries being made
Yeah.
because of that. But
Yeah.
anyway, but like the people from The Biggest Loser all regained their weight after they left their show, most of them. But in the scientific community,
Do we know why that was? Was it
well,
because they did not maintain it, or was it because there was other factors that were required, or
so
I feel yeah. Go
yeah.
ahead.
Oh no, well, so we know. So all this has
Yeah.
been studied and studied actually really well now, and there are
Hmm.
hundreds of studies in medical literature showing this. So
Right.
95% of people who use lifestyle intervention to lose weight will regain their weight once they stop the intervention. So you basically have to
Yes.
behave like you're on The Biggest Loser
For the rest of
for
your
the rest
life.
of your life. Or else
Yes.
it's not going to work.
Yes.
And so with medications, the GLP-1 medications, and I'm sure we'll get to that at some point because
Yeah.
it's a hot topic that everybody wants to talk about. 80% of people regain their weight after stopping. So
Right.
better than lifestyle, but neither of them come even close to surgery, where the numbers completely flipped, where only 20% of people after bariatric surgery regain a significant amount of their weight. So surgery
What? So yeah.
surgery has always been the most sustained weight loss. And it's
Okay.
usually, you asked why, and in the early days, people just blame the patient. Oh, a firm must be cheating. He got his surgery, or he took his medications, he stopped his medication, and now he's having a smoothie at Smoothie King every day, and pounding sugar packets in his free time. Well, that didn't happen. People didn't do that.
Right.
Like nobody sabotages themselves. Maybe not nobody. Few people sabotage themselves to that degree. Like, why would you do that? Why would you purposefully do that to yourself? But that was what we thought for ages. We just blame the patient. It's the easiest thing to do. But then we realized it's actually just the biology of obesity, which we didn't really understand and still don't understand big chunks of it. But there have actually been recent studies that are really interesting, which talk about epigenetics. And for your listeners who don't know what epigenetics is all about, that's the study of how the environment changes your genes,
Yes.
and then what that means is that your genes don't work the same. They might not work as well. They might make different proteins. They might not make any protein. Sort of different depending on the gene. But
Wait, yeah, I'm sorry. Before we get there, I want to get there. I just have a couple of quick follow-ups just on a couple of things that you said at first, just to break it
okay,
down in case anyone has any questions or that
yeah.
anyone because
Well, we
I
can go
just
back to yeah.
yeah
I'm
yeah
trying
yeah
to trying my
yeah.
hardest to keep it simple, but it's a complex
No, you're
topic.
doing a great job. No, so far this is perfect. But there's just a couple of what I like to do is introduce a concept, and then if I have any questions like that, I for myself don't know or would like to know more about to elaborate them real quickly and then kind of keep track along the way. Can
Okay,
you just explain real quickly how the surgery works
sure.
and what the process is for that, please?
Sure. Yeah.
Thanks.
So there are two major types of bariatric surgery in the United States that make up the vast majority of procedures, although there are other procedures as well that are performed by some. But the two major ones are the gastric bypass, which is the one that most people know about and most people equate with bariatric surgery because that was the one that got really popular sort of in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's the one where people had some really bad complications, so it made a lot of news.
What was
And
that? How does that surgery work? How does the gastric bypass work?
right, so in that surgery, what we do is well, so first of all, back in the old days, we used to do those surgeries via a cut on the abdomen. Now we use laparoscopic instruments, which means 5 small holes, biggest one's about an inch, and we can do everything with a camera and
Wow.
instruments that look like, well, they almost look like chopsticks with little something on the end of it
Hmm.
to do what you need to do.
Right.
And so there's been a lot of advances in bariatric surgery since 1991 when the National Institutes of Health first sort of approved bariatric surgery as a treatment of obesity until now, which is, 35 years later.
Hmm.
But with that operation, we take a stapling device, we make a small pouch out of the stomach, and then we actually divide the intestines and bring a piece of that intestine up to that small pouch so that food goes in. It goes into this little pouch so you don't eat very much before you feel full. And then it goes out into your intestines, but it bypasses, hence the name, bypass, but it bypasses the stomach. And then a fair amount, depending on how it's done, it bypasses a significant amount of your small intestine. So some of the food you eat doesn't even really get absorbed that well.
Right. So what happens to that food, hypothetically?
Oh, it just runs through you, for lack of a better
Okay.
word.
Gotcha.
We're,
Yeah. Okay.
we're going to keep it PG
But
here.
it limits, so it essentially limits the amount that you could consume.
It limits how much you eat, and then it
Okay.
also limits to some degree what you can absorb of what you eat.
Right.
So for kids, that wasn't really a great option in my mind. And now I would say almost 20 years ago, for adults as well, most people moved to something called the sleeve gastrectomy, which is a much simpler surgery, easier to perform, a lower complication rate. And with that operation, we basically just remove about 80 to 90% of your stomach.
Whoa.
Take it out. Yeah. So it also obviously limits how much you can eat,
Hmm.
but it doesn't impact your absorption at all because your intestines are still in the normal anatomy. And it in kids has been shown to be pretty much just as good as bypass. In the adults, it's still a little, there's still controversy, which is better.
What would be the controversy in which is more effective?
Well, they both have similar weight loss and similar resolution of the obesity-related diseases up front.
Yeah.
Bypass has a little bit more weight loss, but there's some question about recurrence or weight regain and whether sleeve gastrectomy has higher weight regain, which I think is going to become irrelevant because I think what's maybe is going to happen is that when people start to regain their weight, that's when they'll get on their GLP-1 medication.
Right.
And because it is, depending on whose numbers you look at, the sleeve is about 10 times as safe as the gastric bypass, or 10 times safer, I guess, is English.
10 times safer?
Yeah. So if a gastric bypass complication rate might be 1%,
Okay.
sleeve gastrectomy
Ah, I
complication
see.
might
Is a
be
tenth of that.
0.1%. Yeah.
I see. I see. I
So,
see.
so for kids, that became that was easy. Back when I started doing kids in 2000 and I guess 9. Well, I guess my first bariatric surgery operation on the kid was in 2004. But then when I started my own program in 2010,
Okay.
I only wanted to do I only wanted to do sleeve gastrectomy because I didn't want. I was worried about the gastric bypass in terms of nutrition and because of the amount of food you don't absorb
Right.
for kids, and then I was also worried about the complication rate. And I should go back one step and say, so from 2005 to 2009, I was doing laparoscopic adjustable gastric banding in kids, which that procedure is pretty much almost extinct now, although you can still find it.
What was it?
We put a little device around the top of the stomach, and
Mm-hmm.
it was basically like a belt with a balloon on the inside, and the balloon was attached to actually a port that sat outside of your abdomen underneath your skin, and you would come into the office, let's say once, what was it? It was, you come in frequently, and then it would maybe once a month, and then you spaced out, and you would just put a little bit of fluid into that balloon, and eventually it would tighten up, and it would basically make you feel full all the time. But it had lots of complications, and it was a pain for patients to have to come in and get the adjustments, and it just didn't really work that well.
Yeah.
It's still FDA approved, and I still think one company makes them, I think, but it doesn't make up
It's not generally practiced. Right. Right. And real quick, I'm sorry if when someone's walking into these cases, say either with surgery, either of the surgeries, say, right? What's the process look like in terms of weight loss? Does that happen immediately? Does that do they walk out and they're 40 pounds less, or how does that work? Right, exactly. Can you explain that, please?
Yeah. So I should say, first of all, almost every patient goes through a 3 to 6 month preoperative preparation period where you sort of learn how to eat, you sort of make some of the behavior changes that are going to be necessary. So it's not like you walk into surgery.
Mm-hmm.
And then after surgery, so one of the really interesting scientific findings that has spurred a lot of scientific discovery, including some of the GLP-1 type hormones, is that for gastric bypass patients, if they had diabetes and they were on insulin, many of them, if not most of them, would no longer require their insulin even before they left the hospital, even before they lost any weight. Because you don't really lose weight. You lose weight in the first 3 months, more or less, and you can lose 100 pounds in 3 months, but you don't lose it on the day of surgery.
Right.
And so that was a really interesting finding that a lot of people have spent a lot of years trying to figure out why that happens, and I don't really think anyone has quite figured it out yet.
Mm-hmm.
But so you get surgery, usually go home 1 or 2 days post-procedure. You really are almost doing nothing but drinking for the first 2 weeks, and then you get advanced on, everybody has their own sort of special little diet. But most patients after either surgery can only eat about a handful of bites before they get full. So we need to teach people before that, if you're only going to eat this little bit, this is what you need to eat.
Right.
You need to take a multivitamin, and you need to stay hydrated.
Yeah.
And most recently there was a publication where I think it was whatever the Lifestyle Medicine Association doctors got together with the Obesity Society, I think, and then the Obesity Medicine Association to talk about how to teach people how to eat while taking a GLP-1 medication, because it makes it so you don't eat very little.
Sure.
Or you don't eat very much. And as soon as it came out, I actually emailed like the lead guy, because he's randomly some guy that I went to college with. And I said, dude, did no one bother to talk to the surgeons? We've been teaching people how to eat 5 bites of food 3 times a day for 30 years. Like, you guys didn't think that we could be of use? And he actually was honest with me. He's like, oh, yeah, I have nothing against the surgeons, but it didn't occur to me to include them in these guidelines. And I'm like, yeah, that's the problem. And that's the problem with, like,
everything is too compartmentalized.
Yeah, it's a problem with medicine in America anyway, but it's certainly a problem with obesity. And it's getting better. We're starting to learn to play in the same sandbox more and more. And I think a lot of people understand that, like, medicate, kind of like with cancer, where chemotherapy and surgery work together to best cure the cancer or best treat the cancer. It's the same thing with obesity. It's like, it's not, do you need meds or do you need surgery? There's a good, and lifestyle goes for everybody gets lifestyle. But then what else? Is it medicine? Is it surgery? And the answer is, you figure out which one's right for you to start, but you might need both, and you might need, medication, surgery, then medication, or no one at the individual level can predict what your outcome is going to be. Like, I can't, even with the best genetic testing out there, I can't say you're going to benefit.
There's too many variables, right? I mean, there's too many variables that you can't, that I couldn't even begin to tell you as a patient, and you couldn't even begin to figure out as my doctor, right? Yeah.
Well, that's why I think, like, they're the medication advocates, and I have nothing against them, and I'm starting a practice where I'll be prescribing these medications as well. But there are a lot of folks who are really excited that someday there'll be a medication combination that can be as good as surgery. But I think that probably is never going to happen, because when you do surgery, there are internal connections between the gut and the brain that get, for a better word,
I was actually about to start asking you about that. Right. That communication is through the gut microbiome, right? The communication between your gut and your brain?
Maybe.
Potentially?
Maybe.
I'm not sure either way.
The gut-brain axis.
Okay. Please.
Yeah. There's something called the gut-brain axis. And basically, there's the vagus nerve, which goes from your stomach to your brain. And then there are all sorts of, like, mediators, like GLP-1, that your gut releases that go through your circulation to your brain. And they mostly
tell your brain you're hungry or not, right?
Which is the part of your brain. That's what the hypothalamus does. It's sort of the hunger center. But it turns out it's not only the hunger center, it's actually also the fullness center, the satiety center. And it's also where your weight set point gets, for lack of a better word, it gets determined probably in utero by your hypothalamus. And the hypothalamic set point may have to do with the mom's gut microbiome. The fetus, it doesn't have a gut microbiome when they're born, but it can certainly, it's a possible mechanism by which the environment can impact your weight. And the reason I'm a little bit of a skeptic about the microbiome, although I'm open-minded about almost everything, so I don't want to close off that opportunity that the microbiome is important. But I'm a skeptic because I published one study in my own patients where we looked at their microbiome both before surgery and then after they'd lost 50 pounds. And it actually wasn't that different between before surgery and after surgery.
And we're back. Sorry about that. So, So my question before we cut out was, what factors determine, or do we know what factors determine the gut microbiome health? Because, I mean, I'm sure weight has something to do with it, but if someone's, like, especially post-surgery, if someone's not getting a lot of nutrition, if someone's not eating a lot of food, I can imagine that it wouldn't necessarily be strengthened right away or until they got back to a regular diet, no?
Well, I think it's a complicated question because I don't think... well, first of all, it's certainly possible that the reason, for instance, in my study, there weren't great microbiome changes is that we don't actually have a good way of measuring the microbiome, right? The microbiome mostly people measure in stool samples, but what's actually in your small intestine might be completely different than what is coming out in your stool. So part of the issue is that we don't have a great way of measuring it for most people. But the issue, so, I think we're sort of staying away from ultra-processed foods and eating foods that come right out of the ground and eating healthier. I think those things can contribute to a healthier microbiome. Again, I'm not 100% sure whether a healthy microbiome helps you lose weight or contributes to the development of obesity, or if it's just an innocent bystander where, like, if you lose weight and get healthier, your microbiome changes. Like, what direction is the interaction? I don't know.
Right.
And there are companies who are trying to market, like, even, well, not just companies. Like, there's now, like, you can buy a soda that has probiotics in it. Because
that's all over the place now.
Right. People are playing on the idea that the microbiome can be manipulated for better health. But unfortunately, the reality is that just like everything that seems to be a viral trend before too long, the science just isn't there yet. Like, people are like making companies based on the microbiome well before the microbiome has been shown to actually have an important place in human health. And
we're jumping the gun.
And then what happens is people need to make money from that company, so they become they get online influencers, or they become online influencers. I'm positioning myself as a de-influencer, so I'm going online or videos or podcasts like this one where I just basically talk about facts. I don't talk about, like, if I have a topic where I don't actually know the facts, I can present the facts that are on both sides. If they're not in congruence with each other, if they don't jibe with each other. But I'm not going to go tell you, go buy a supplement, because I'm not selling any supplements, and also because most supplements don't do anything for your health. But where we're at as a society is where, our HHS secretary, and then the woman he's appointed to be the Surgeon General.
Yeah, Dr. Means.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, yeah. They're basically peddling in the misinformation sort of business. Like,
You feel that way?
Oh, 100%. I
Okay.
feel like, and I'll tell you why.
Sure.
So certain things that RFK says or wants to do are for sure great. Like,
sure.
We don't need
like the
artificial
dyes
food
and stuff.
Yeah,
Right.
we need those.
Yeah.
And yes, everything should have less sugar. Totally support all that. And I've actually been on TV a fair number of times talking about those things. But then in the next breath, he talks about vaccine conspiracy theories, or he talks about beef tallow. And these are things that that completely have been vetted by the scientific community, and there's no question about them anymore. But his base doesn't want to believe that, so they peddle in these sort of,
Yeah, I understand. I think right now is actually, we're living in a beyond fascinating time, because there's been a collapse of, and I've talked about this a bunch on the show, just, both in a professional setting, with professionals, and shooting the shit with my friends, but the sense that no one really kind of knows who to trust anymore. That there's just been such a breakdown of trust and processes, and like what you just said. On one hand, someone could say something that makes a lot of sense, like food dyes are bad, and we probably don't want to be consuming as much ultra processed food as we do, and that resonates with people. And so what follows is that any beef tallow, whatever follows next, is held in the same light, or associated with the same kind of positivity, and vice versa. And people that feel, that if they feel disenchanted with the whole, with everything that had to do with COVID, then all of a sudden anyone that makes any kind of recommendations for health, they say, "What do you know? You messed up with COVID." What? Just because you're right about one thing doesn't mean you're wrong about everything else, and vice versa.
Right. But even the COVID example, and going back to Casey Means, like, she never finished her medical training, but she ended up starting like a sort of an
levels
medicine, alternative medicine practice, and wrote a book and became a social media influencer, and now that's That's who our Surgeon General nomination is. Not some, academic guru who actually only talks about science and facts, but a woman who, is on the fringe of accepted medical practice. But even with COVID, or the COVID vaccines. So yes, some of the mRNA vaccines had side effects for sure. Like lots of people have had side effects from those vaccines. And some of them were severe, and some of them were not so severe. But it's been demonized, actually, to the point where now RFK has basically stopped funding for all mRNA vaccines, which is basically paralyzing us for the next COVID that comes along. The next virus that comes along, if we can't use mRNA technology, we are hosed. And so even if you didn't like the COVID mRNA vaccine, the answer is to study it more. The answer isn't to stop all funding for that particular type of vaccine, or even that vaccine in of itself. There are still people who are getting, especially kids, who get long COVID, and it's devastating for them. And they don't have the vaccine. It's not available this fall because RFK basically disbanded the committee that makes the decisions and then repopulated it with his sycophants, not medical giants, but people who he knew were going to make his base happy. And that's sort of where we are in politics and in the world. And as you said, it's just it's really, I saw something in, I can't remember which news agency, whether it was, I don't know, anyway, some CNN or New York Times or Washington Post or something, U.S. News and World Report, can't remember. But somebody did a survey of sort of trust in leadership across the different domains. And it was crap.
It's been going down. It's been going down for 60, 70 straight years, and the last 5 or 6 years have really plummeted. I was actually curious to ask because, and I don't want to stick on it too long because I feel like it's a topic that's kind of been beat over the head so many times, but I think it's relevant just as a finishing point. I think it's interesting because. There, at the beginning of COVID, everyone kind of was freaked out. And then at one point, I remember, there was a shift. And maybe it was after a month or 3 months or 5 months. I don't remember exactly what it was. But at some point, it dawned on me oh, my God, this has turned into a political conversation. It's not a health conversation.
Right.
This isn't a question of is there, how do I make sure that I'm healthy and not sick? And how do we stop this? What feels like a rampant virus I'm going through now, it feels like it's a question of are you Republican, are you Democrat, are you moderate, what do you think? And I'm what the heck does one thing have to do with the next, and why is this even that? And so I was I think that health, especially now with the obesity conversation and the general, the fact that, and again, there was a great point I heard recently. I forgot who was saying it, but I haven't heard anyone, public figure, at least in my life, and I'm only, I'm 30, but ever campaign politically on health, on children's health, on adults' health, on on fitness, on any of that. And I thought that was really, really fascinating.
Yeah, I think RFK tried that because he didn't really have much to offer in anything else, but. As you saw, it didn't get him anywhere close to enough of a support to be a major party candidate. But and again, if Anthony Fauci, he's not a perfect human being. I know people who have worked with him and said he was kind of like a know-it-all jerk in many ways. But he was trying to do what he thought was right for the country. It wasn't because he had one political agenda or another. He was just trying to save as many lives as he thought as he could, and he thought he was doing what he was trying to accomplish that aim. So again, even if you disagree with him, and I think that again, getting back to it goes back to everything in our world today. Rather than having an intellectual discourse with him or with other public health figures, it just became
A
us
shouting
or
match.
them.
Everything's a
Yeah,
shouting match.
yeah,
Everything's a shouting
and the
match.
same thing happens today. Like, again, I go back to the example of the mRNA vaccine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that technology necessarily until they prove that there is. But like, it's such a political hot button that it was like, oh, we're just gonna
Yeah, it's going to be very
stop all.
even if there is even if anything's done, it's going to be hard for it to be objective because it's become
Yeah,
so politicized.
right.
So,
And now
that's
on the flip
sad.
side, like anything that comes from the vaccine committee that RFK has now reappointed everybody, no one's going to believe that either. Like everybody's like that.
Right.
That
And either way, we end up worse off, which is a shame.
right,
And
right.
that's kind
And
of
so,
And I mean, that was actually full circle back to even my podcast. It was there was that things have strayed so far from just being able to have a regular conversation
right.
that it's obscene, and it's really a shame. And I think that and yeah, I mean, I don't want to get I don't
Yeah,
think much more into it than this
yeah.
because I think that.
It's a different
But
podcast episode.
it is, and you know what? At the end of the day, I also think that this particular topic also has been being over everyone's
Right.
head until like a
Yeah.
dead horse, and I think that
Yeah.
it's what I think for a lot of people, their opinions are their opinions at this point
Yeah.
about it, and there's not much else that we're
Which
really
yeah.
going to do because the echo chambers and yelling and podcasts and everything like that, and so.
Well,
I
that's sort of
welcome I
why.
welcome everyone's perspective, and I think it's
Yeah.
really great.
But that's why I'm
And
sort of positioning myself as a quote unquote de-influencer on
yeah,
the
that's a
topic of
great. It's
obesity
really cool.
because I don't really have an agenda other than getting people healthier. Like I don't really care. I often describe myself as intervention agnostic. Like I don't care if you want to use diet and exercise. I don't care if you want to use medications. I don't care if you want to use surgery. I just
Right.
want you to get
Be better.
healthier. And
Yeah.
I can tell you the data. I can tell you the facts, the data, and then you as the patient should do what you want with them because that's the great thing about being a human is that you get to decide, well, at least in this country, you get to decide what you want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, like, again, it's like, why are there people out there who are saying things like, oh, if we just change food policy, that's all we need to do. Everything's going to get, everybody's going to get healthier or,
There's no
why?
magic button. There's no magic button, but
No.
I think it's just in general. I think it's like I think at least from what I try to be charitable. I think that these are all positive steps that if we did would only have I feel essentially net positive. It's only net positive to get rid of the dyes from the food. I
Yeah, of
mean,
course.
unless you can make a case otherwise.
Yeah.
Um,
And actually, even those
so
data.
I think
So
that
let's
people
say,
in general were healthy. Yeah, go ahead, please.
oh, I was just going to say, even if those things don't cause problems, like no one needs them. No one needs their ice cream to be bright blue or bright green, right? Like so, like it's not a big deal when you do some of those things. And you're right; those are probably net positives. They're either neutral or positive. There's no
Right.
downside. But there are some downsides to some of the other things, so that's when you really have to be a little bit more careful about what you're
Of course.
saying. And again, I think the obesity world is starting to learn to play together much better, and I think that's a key step in the right direction. And I think docs in general have started to realize that the old-fashioned paternalistic do as I say type of model is not really well received.
Yeah, not
Anymore.
much anymore. Yeah.
Right? So it's called shared decision making or something like that. And so I think we're starting to move in the right direction in terms of that kind of stuff. But the rest of it. I mean,
Can I ask you about alcohol and obesity? Is there a correlation between people that drink a lot or frequently and people that are overweight, or vice versa, or what have you
well,
seen?
so actually, alcoholism is an example, analogy that I use to talk about obesity quite often because 30, 40 years ago, people thought alcoholism was a disease of the weak-minded and the weak-willed, and you just couldn't keep away from the bottle. The temptations were too great, and you just
Yeah.
overindulged. But then people realized that it's actually it's a genetic disease that you can inherit from your parents. And it changed a lot of the stigma around alcoholism. And it changed how we treat it and how we view it. And obesity is the same way. Like, people just think obesity is because people don't work out enough or eat well and that they're lazy or whatever, which is insane. And we actually now know that a lot of it is genetically inherited, but it's still so stigmatized that folks don't want to appreciate that. They don't want to consider that. So
It'll take some time, I think.
Yeah. So it's actually the opposite. People with alcoholism tend not to, they actually are usually skinny because they don't eat enough anything else. So most people with alcoholism are actually on the thinner side. But if you drink a lot of sugar-sweetened beverages, certainly alcohol has a lot of calories too. And obviously everybody knows somebody with a big beer belly. So it's not black and white. But yeah, so calories consumed by drinking are probably the number one modifiable behavior for people if they really want to start to think about their weight or address their weight and get healthier is, like there's sugar in almost every drink that's out there unless you specifically look for things without it. Obviously, like I was in New York. I used to live in New York City. Haven't lived there in a while, but I was in New York, let's say, 15 years ago.
Which part of the city were you living in?
I lived in Murray Hill, I worked at NYU, so I lived in Murray Hill.
Gotcha.
Even before that, I was in the Upper East Side because I did my general surgery training at Cornell.
I love the Upper East Side, by the way. I love it. It's my favorite part of Manhattan. It's quiet, it's residential, and it's affordable, or more affordable, relatively speaking.
Yeah, everybody has their own favorites. But I remember I was downtown, probably in Soho, because that's one of my favorites. And I can't remember, I may be meeting my wife, I don't know who I was meeting, but I was at a bar, and they were sort of famous for their mojitos, and I had them make me a mojito, and one of their things is they make them right in front of you. And the dude, or dudette, woman, I don't know who it was, the bartender, started making one, and he or she opened 4 of those little sugar packets.
Oh, man.
To put in the bottom of the mojito with the mint to muddle it and then put in the rum and whatever. And I've never had a mojito since. I was like, oh my God, if I knew that a mojito had, each one of those sugar packets is usually about 5 grams of sugar or 4 grams of sugar. So if I knew a mojito had 20 grams of sugar in it, I never would have had them. So that's where alcohol can really, mixers especially, can really increase your calorie intake.
I had the same thing, by the way, with beer, because I love craft beer. And so IPAs, apparently part of the way, or sours, the way that they get these IPAs or sours up to 8, 9, 10% ABV is by dumping more sugar in, or more fruit, more fruit, in.
And it might, I think it's, I don't actually know the caloric difference between an IPA and or a sour and, let's say, a lager. But
a Bud Light has, let's say, less than 100 calories, right? Or Guinness, I think, has famously, they say whatever that means. I don't know what the equivalent of whatever it says on the bottle, 100 calories. But there was a brewery I went to where they had the calories next to the beers, and they had a stout, which was like a heavy barrel aged, sweet beer, and I think it had like 450 calories for an 8-ounce pour or something crazy like that.
Well, right. And, I'm no brewmeister, but I do know that, the sugar is the fuel for the yeast to make the alcohol. So I think, they have to add more sugar in it to get the higher alcohol contents. But yeah, like I think that sort of helped start the whole, like the White Claw craze or whatever, the seltzer craze, because they can make them with relatively few calories. It's basically like club
alcohol
soda.
Consumption in general feels like it's going down. At least,
there was actually
my circles.
Yeah, I just saw that actually in a. I'm always scouring the news because I'm always looking for things to sort of pitched to TV,
Mm-hmm.
cable TV networks, because was doing a bunch of them, although it's dried up over the last month or so. But anyway, I think mostly because there's so much other news other than health that people can talk about.
Yeah.
But I did see another survey that did, and it was actually interesting because it said that so in general, alcohol consumption is down for sure, but for whatever reason, they compared it by political party, which I have no idea why that mattered to anybody. But supposedly, there's a bigger decrease in alcohol consumption among Republicans than Democrats. I have no idea what that means. I don't even know why.
If I were to take a wild stab, really, I would just probably say that younger crowds tend to be left-leaning. Younger crowds are a little bit more leaning towards weed and cannabis today than they are towards alcohol in general.
Yeah.
And I think that,
but it's the opposite. It's Republicans who've dropped more than Democrats.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah,
well, because I don't think Democrats were drinking very much recently anyway. So a lot of these Rogan Bros, Movement Bros, or whatever. Hearing about this for the last 5 years, I think a lot of those kind of people have been have been dropping that. But either way, it's fascinating.
I thought you were going to say it's due to the Trump 1 and Trump 2, that the Democrats are still drinking their sorrows away.
No, that's funny. I didn't think about that. So can we get back to epigenetics a little bit? Now I'm sorry
Jesus.
That's right, because I think that this is a perfect spot. We're back to it, right? Because now we're talking about people think that it's not just a stigma anymore, just like alcoholism. Right. And so what are epigenetics, and what's the context for obesity?
Yeah. So epigenetics is the field of how genetic material gets altered by the environment, by the external environment. And it's a burgeoning field. It wasn't even really a field until maybe 15, 20 years ago. And it's not really well understood, but what is understood is that your DNA can be altered by
experience.
Let's say ultra-processed foods, or let's say environmental toxins.
Right.
That's how radiation leads to cancer, for instance, potentially. Right. What is known now is that the epigenetically modified DNA genes can be passed on from parent to child.
Right.
So the people who are in the food camp, like the food is medicine people, which I don't necessarily support, because food is food and medicine is medicine, but they argue that the obesity epidemic can't be about anything other than food, because food is the only thing that's changed in the last 50 years. And as we talked about earlier, 50 years is about when the obesity prevalence really started to rise. But what they don't consider is that, yes, it's the food, but it's the food and how it interacts with your genes. And that's how it gets passed on from parent to child. That's why, me as a pediatric surgeon and a pediatric obesity expert, I see kids who are 8 or 9 who haven't been on earth long enough to eat enough to eat themselves into obesity, even if I believe that anybody did that, which I don't. Nobody eats themselves into obesity. People eat, and then their bodies react with obesity, because we all know, we all either have a sibling or a family member or a cousin or a friend who eats the same as we do, but is either 20 pounds heavier or 20 pounds lighter.
Sure. Or you could be a freak athlete and you could work out every day and eat garbage. And eat garbage and you're fine. And then vice versa. You eat healthy all day, and then the people that genetically, they just walk around with a bag of candy all day and they're totally fine and they're good to go. Right.
So it's clearly more complicated than diet. But the study that came out recently, which I think really is going to help shed light on the whole weight regain thing that we were talking about with both medicines and surgery and lifestyle, is that There's now evidence that fat cells have what people are calling memory. So like the genes and the proteins that are being made in fat cells, even if you lose weight, they may not change. So when you stop your intervention, they may still basically drive you back to the unhealthiness that you had originally. And it actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because
would that be come in the form of a craving? Is that like is this
well,
or is this just that it reacts to food in a similar way?
Well, so again, with the gut-brain axis, we don't really know how fat cells interact with the brain directly or even indirectly. But let's say they have, let's say fat cells have a memory, and the fat cell, when you have obesity, has changed your brain to, prefer salty foods or processed foods or sugary foods, whatever. And then you have surgery, and if you have surgery, let's say, and you respond well. So we haven't talked about statistics, which bores everybody, but I like to talk about it.
No, I'd love to hear. I'd love to talk about it. Yeah, please.
Well, mostly because everything's a bell curve. So like when you hear average patient, what does that actually mean? And what does that mean for you as an individual? It almost means nothing for you as an individual. You might be average, or you might be a super responder or a non-responder. And the data are that, like with any bell curve, 2/3 of the people are within one standard deviation above the average or below the average. 2/3, but then 1/3 live further out. So if you're in the one third that is a super responder, good for you. Like you're going to respond to surgery like gangbusters. You might probably not going to need anything else ever, like medication or anything else. But you also might be in the lowest 5% where surgery doesn't really do much for you. And some of that might be due to your epigenetics and whether your fat cells are whether the epigenetic modifications are so entrenched that you can't fix them, or are they still modifiable? And that may explain why 20% of people gain weight from surgery, but 80%, regain their weight 2 years after surgery, and 80% of people don't. There are data from pediatric bariatric surgery that show that the effects of surgery are actually longer lasting than they are in adults. And it could be the same thing. Like maybe we're getting the kids before these epigenetic changes are so entrenched in their, and it might be fat, it could be other cells around the body. Like it's such a new field that we don't even have enough information to hang our hat there. Although I have always believed in what's called the intergenerational transmission of obesity, meaning from parents to kids, because I've seen so many young kids with obesity. And again, there's just no way, even if I believe that lack of exercise and not eating right could lead to obesity, which again, I don't believe that. But even if I did, you can't tell me that, 8-year-olds can do that in 8 years on Earth. Like it's just.
Well, I mean, we know. I know, for example, and I don't know what this has. I'm sure this has to do with genetics for sure. But my wife just a couple months ago was she gave birth, and thank God everything was smooth and okay. Thank you very much. It's really exciting, little girl, and
awesome.
And we were talking to the nurse, and she was telling, and the baby was born, I think at 7-1 or 7-3, and the nurse said that she was just coming, and she's like, this past, the last couple of days, I've seen, 10, 12-pound babies being born on a regular basis. And, I grew up, and I'm one of 6, and none of us were anywhere near that. It was almost considered, it was considered crazy at that point, but apparently it's becoming pretty common. I'm sure that has to do with what we're talking about, right?
Right. So we know that moms who gain excess weight during their pregnancy or get gestational diabetes or actually have diabetes from their weight going into pregnancy, their babies all have a much higher incidence of obesity. And actually, interestingly, another interesting study that is relatively recent, it turns out that those same babies have a higher incidence of autism spectrum disorder. So like when all this, again, the vaccines causing
Hmm.
autism furor came up, there were a lot of publications that showed that actually, there are a lot of other factors outside of even
Sure.
before people are born that can impact your autism risk. So yeah, no, so for sure, the obesity epidemic has impacted fetuses, for lack of a better word, and they are being born bigger, and they are born with often with, again, higher hypothalamic weight set points.
Hmm.
And there was even a study at CNN that I saw that showed that sugar exposure, what was it, in the first 100 days, no, 100 days? Wait, what was it? First 1,000 days.
Yeah,
First
because 100's
1,000
a lot.
days. No,
1,000
first
days
1,000.
is 3 years,
First
right?
1,000, yes. So
Okay.
first 1,000 days from conception.
Ah.
So from 9 months pre-birth
Hmm.
to
Right. To 2
2
years old.
years post-birth.
Yeah.
Sugar exposure in that period of time was, and sugar obviously on the fetus is coming from mom.
Sure.
Sugar exposure in that period of time was critical to your risk of developing type 2 diabetes as a child. And
Wow.
again, it's like no one thinks about people that young, right? They just think, kids will be kids.
Yeah.
Grow out of, if they're chubby, they'll grow out of it, or it doesn't really matter what they eat because they're going to be exercising, running around all day, so they can eat whatever they want. And for lots of people, that's true, and that may be true even for the majority of people. But I think where the genetic scores that are being developed and some of the other predictive models that are coming out, this is where they can be useful because, first of all, I encourage any woman, any person, actually, man or woman, who's thinking of conceiving to think about their own health before they conceive, because if you optimize your own health before you conceive, you're going to optimize the health of your child that you're going to conceive. Probably also optimize your chance of conceiving.
Right.
And, so, but not only do moms have to pay attention to their, not only would it help if moms pay attention to their, or potential moms pay attention to their weight before they conceive, but during pregnancy and then in the first 2-3 years of life and on, because obviously it's not only sort of the direct impact of what you're feeding or of what the kid's eating or whatever, but also just think about the behavior that you're modeling, right? So if you're a young parent, mom or dad, and you're eating chips in front of your 4-year-old, your 4-year-old's going to automatically be like, oh, yeah, chips are, that's normal. I
Yeah.
eat chips.
Yeah.
So,
We grew up
think about
wanting a treat, and we'd have a strawberry. We thought we thought that blueberries. Like my mom would be like, okay, if you're good, we'll give you a strawberry. But
you
she
grew up in a stricter household than I did. I grew up, and I'm also 25 years older than you, so things were,
yeah. I think it was
my era was
heavily
different than your
Eastern.
era, but
It was. I think my mom was heavily influenced by her Eastern European parents. Which there's a whole generation in them of themselves. But
yeah,
tough cookies, and they're very,
yeah.
very sensitive, I guess, towards this kind of stuff. So I like my youngest brother's 13. He'll make himself a snack. Like he doesn't go to the supermarket or to the gas station. He grabs an apple, or a couple of oranges, and that's how he just that's all he knows.
But
That's all he's used to.
yeah, but even in communities where that sort of dietary behavior is common, and I used to work in New York City at NYU, and there were Hasidic communities, in Brooklyn and elsewhere, and they have the same Eastern European roots as you do, but there were families with severe obesity problems, and it
I
again
believe
was
it.
mostly genetic. It just got passed down from generation to generation, and I've taken care of.
Well, a lot of these guys don't eat like saints either. I'll tell you that.
Well, and not anymore, right? It may have started that way, but maybe not
Yeah,
anymore. But
yeah,
but But it definitely, I mean, it runs in families. And then I'd see families where, let's say, you said you're one of 6. I'd see families where everybody in the family eats as you described, but one of the 6 kids has a weight problem. And the parents would come in and they'd be like super upset because I don't understand. Why is my one child having weight issues when nobody else in the family has, and they eat the same stuff and they exercise the same amount? And then I'll start asking them, like, well, does mom or dad, do either of you guys have any obesity that runs in your families? Oh, yeah, somebody's brother or somebody's uncle or cousin or whatever, somebody. And then you can usually trace it back to where it might have had some genetic origins. But again, it's like the natural experiment that I've lived throughout taking care of all these patients.
Sure.
Where, I mean, I know for a fact that diet and exercise do not impact obesity in everyone because, because I've seen families where it's the 1 in 6.
We're so used to trying to come up with one word answers for all these things.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how long it took. How many years did it take? And I'm not comparing, at all by any means, of course, but the homeless issue that we've had in the last, 30, 40 years, or maybe less, but how long people spent saying it's a money problem, whereas and now we're having the conversation. A lot of it's a mental health problem as well. A lot of this is a sickness. A lot of this is, other factors that, and I'm not saying this to compare. God forbid, I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to say that anyone that says it's one thing, it's just diet. It's just
Right.
if you just got off the couch or ran a marathon, then you wouldn't be obese anymore. I'm sure that's not the case either.
Well, so, it's human nature. Humans don't like ambiguity, and they don't like not knowing the answers. It's much more satisfying to be able to say yes or no, black or white. People don't like gray. And so, people don't like, even in medicine, people don't like the, doc, what should I have, surgery, or should I take a medication?
Right.
It's that there are no answers to those types of questions, and the reality is, again, I go back to statistics, and it's because of bell curves and how statistics work, and it's never going to be. Most questions are never binary. Most questions are, what's the solution to immigration? It's not just throwing people out of the country. It's something far more complex.
Yeah.
It's any major issue. You brought up homelessness, poverty, whatever.
Divorce rates. It's a big deal in the country for the last 20 years.
Or just freaking look at what's going on internationally. What's the solution in the Ukraine? What's the solution in
Gaza?
There's no. I mean, I don't want to be too. I don't even know what the right word is, pessimistic or nihilistic, but there are no solutions to those sort of situations. There are compromises that everybody hates.
Yeah.
There's no solution. I don't know.
Yeah, especially because issues that are complicated to get to require complicated and nuanced answers too. I think that's also the thing, right?
Not to mention,
again, if we can't even tell you what factors epigenetics have or not, then how in the world are you going to tell me whether or not it's going to be something that's going to be part of the answer? I hear you. It's a great point.
But I do think, again, going back to the positives with RFK and the positives with the food as medicine movement, there are modifiable food factors and dyes and ultra processing and things that we can definitely improve upon to make food in the United States healthier. But that's not going to cure. It's not going to cure obesity. It's not going to cure obesity. It might help prevent obesity in future generations. But the only real solution, if you're talking about solutions, and I'm not even sure this would be a solution, but it's the best I can come up with, is you basically have to do everything all at once. You have to treat everybody who has obesity now before they have the next generation of kids, while improving the food and improving exercise opportunities and getting rid of the stigma and dealing with mental health and adverse childhood experiences and all the other things that have been shown to contribute.
It's a societal problem.
Right. So if you could do all that at once, yeah, if you could do all that at once, that's like the same as saying, well, if you can, again, all these complicated problems have, as you said, complicated solutions, and maybe even like I was sort of alluding to with the international affairs type of stuff. Maybe it's not. Maybe solutions aren't even really what we should be looking for. Maybe we should just be looking like to make things better to a degree, like or just making things like if we can make. Let's say we could even get obesity rates. The obesity rate in America right now is about 40%, which is crazy, and it keeps going up. It hasn't like plateaued. But maybe if we could just get it to plateau. Like maybe that's what we should be like. That should be the first step. Let's just try to get things to stop getting worse. And now we can start to think about how do we make things better, and how do we stop things from getting worse by letting people get treatment and encouraging people to get treatment, and like the healthcare costs related to obesity and the cancers
Oh
that
my
are secondary
gosh.
to obesity. It's just like all this. There's all this data and information that, frankly, is mind blowing that it hasn't spurred some sort of massive. As you said, like maybe not a political movement, but like a movement.
Awakening, yeah, awareness, yeah.
Yeah, if we wanted to deal with with our 30, whatever it is, $3 trillion or $30 trillion debt or whatever our national debt
30,
is,
yeah, 30 trillion.
treating obesity actually might be the best way to do it, because if we could figure out, and of course treating obesity right now is expensive, but the long-term savings, if we could figure out, like how to maintain the health benefits.
Yeah.
Long-term savings would be immeasurable.
Yeah.
And again, that's never going to happen. Like that's a pipe dream that I.
So do you think that it's one of those like shoot for the moon, and if not, you land among the stars kind of cutesy things where like you say let's try to cure it, and then if people are a little better and don't, even if they don't make it to the finish line, at least they're better than they were before. So like you're kind of hoping for that. I mean, like I guess
Well,
that's just
obviously,
my immediate thought when I think of that.
well, on the individual level, people can definitely get better and get healthier and live happier
Yeah.
and healthier and longer lives, 100%. On a societal level, on a population level, I mean, I think that's actually why sort of food as medicine has so much traction, is because it's somewhat achievable.
Right.
It's just not likely to have a huge impact. So how do you, like, what's the right strategy? Shoot for the moon and hope that you get somewhere along the way, or bite off something that's relatively easier to achieve and hope that it accomplishes something. But even
I
with
don't
that,
know.
like I think,
I mean, when it comes to it, I think when it comes to health, it's hard. I don't, because I think that it's also something that's not even rational for most people. This kind of thing has nothing to do with rationality or whether it's good or not. I mean, when I beg my dad, my dad and I are very close. We work together, and very close. And I beg him to exercise because he's in his late 50s and he doesn't work out a ton. And I'm like, it could only make your life better. It could only be good for you.
sure,
Please. And he's like, I know it's good for me. I know I have to. You just can't. But like, it's not about rationality. It's not about whether
right,
something's good.
right,
There's something else
and there have
that's
been
underneath it. Yeah.
right. There have been lots of advocates who feel like education campaigns are what we need to help with America's health. But I would argue no one drinks a Coke thinking it's good for them. No one eats a bag of chips thinking it's good for them. Everybody knows what's good for
Yeah,
them.
but you
and what's
deny
not
it's
good for
that
them.
bad for you. A lot of people will deny,
Yeah,
oh, it's not so bad. I'm drinking Diet Coke. It's
right.
better than a Coke, like,
Yeah,
by the way, which I do
but
want to
it's
ask
still,
about.
yeah.
Sorry,
I
in
still
terms,
think it's like your dad. Like most people know that they should eat better and exercise more. It's
yeah,
not rocket science, and people have heard that message for years.
yeah,
It's how do we make that easier for folks? And and then again, part of it is that like your dad will go through a period where, if he ever starts to exercise, where it sucks because starting to exercise sucks and he's going to be so deconditioned. But if he can fight through that period, he'll then get to a period where he feels great. And he'll
yeah,
be like, oh my God, I wish I'd done this 10 years ago or whatever. But it's getting through
yeah,
that first initial suckitude or
yeah,
pick a word that you,
yeah. I like Suckitude. Suckitude is good. It's good. Can we talk a little bit
yes,
about can we
yes.
talk a little bit about
Diet
the
sodas are terrible. Diet
what'd
sodas
you
are
say?
probably worse. diet sodas are probably terrible. They're probably almost worse for you than sugar soda. So
Okay,
they're like
right.
neck and
So
they're like
forget
neck and
about
neck.
soda. So we could use diet soda in the as like a base metaphor, but the fake sugar versus real sugar, or the
Yeah,
stevia,
right.
Splenda,
Well, yeah.
artificial sugar
So
world.
yeah,
How
so
does that impact
stevia.
us?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wish I knew more about stevia because I think of the artificial sweeteners, that one might have more because at least it's from a plant, so it's not as manufactured as some of the other ones. But usually those sorts of well, first of all, there's now data. There was always data that saccharin caused cancer, but back in the 70s, long before you were born, there was a soda called Tab that basically got run off the market because it had saccharin in it, and it
Oh
supposedly
man.
caused cancer. Turns out that you had to be a lab rat, and you probably had to drink like 2 liters worth of Tab every day to get the saccharin that you would need to get cancer. But that didn't matter. Once the word got out that saccharin caused cancer, like you still see some saccharin packets, like Sweet and Low is still saccharin, and they're still in some like delis and restaurants, but that saccharin basically was run off the face of the earth by by whomever, by lobbyists or some other folks that probably was never as bad as it was made out to be. But all of those different artificial sweeteners have some negative health consequences. Some are linked to cancers, some are linked to diabetes. Some data suggests that they actually just stimulate the same part of your brain that makes you crave sugar, and it just makes you crave sugar more. So in general, I am not a fan of those.
That's interesting because your brain thinks you're getting sugar, but you're not actually getting
Yeah,
enough.
right. Yeah, exactly. Like it makes you want more sugar. It's like having a sweet tooth that like gets worse, I guess. But I think so the reason that fruits, when they're eaten whole, are not nearly as bad for you as when they're turned into a juice, and obviously are good for you because of some of the nutrients they provide, is that the fiber that's in a real plant, in a strawberry or blueberry, like you mentioned, that makes it so that some of the sugar that's in the fruit actually doesn't even get absorbed. But when you concentrate that fruit into a juice, you basically remove all the fiber, but you keep all the sugar, and now you just have growing up, again, everybody was told that orange juice was like the best thing for you. Turns out orange juice isn't actually very good for you at all. And it's like, it's just like, it's part of the issue with this field in general, and potentially why people have so much mistrust in docs, is that it's not intentional, but things change, and our understanding of these things change. So sometimes we make recommendations, and then 10 years later we're like, oh, you know what? All that low-fat stuff we had you eat in the 90s or the 2000s, whatever, whenever low-fat was a thing, turns out those are all bad for you. So sorry,
Right.
our mistake,
Yeah.
our bad. We gave you all this dietary recommendations that were totally off base, but
That's
here
what's
are the new
scary.
recommendations.
But that's
Right?
scary for people, no?
Right, of course. Well, that's why it's easiest for there are actually data even. It's easiest for people to just sort of stick to the basics, like the Mediterranean diet, like eat fish, eat olive oil, eat nuts, eat things that come out of the ground. And if you forget about everything else, that's probably still, and the data suggested is still, the best diet for you. So rather than try to get too fancy and do everything else, it's just really, it probably goes back to what your parents' taught them and my parents' taught them. It's just everything in moderation. Like, that's probably, still the best advice. Now, as food has gotten lower quality, there are certainly some things that, even in moderation, are not good for you. But, again, we don't have to get too... I don't think we have to get too analytical about it. We really just need to, lean proteins, fish, lean meats, legumes, nuts, vegetables, fruits, things that come out of the ground. And if you do that most of the time, if you want an ice cream sundae on, once every couple of weeks, it's okay. You know what I mean? Because you're generally healthy. And again, I don't think you need to necessarily depends on who you are. Everybody's different, and everybody reacts differently. And you know, most people probably don't need to go crazy with that sort of diet as long as they stick to the tenets of it. But if you have a high genetic predisposition towards obesity, maybe that's just how you have to eat your whole life. Like maybe that's just what you need from preconception, post-conception,
Yeah.
2-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old. You just need, and even if that happens, there's still going to be people who still get obesity, even with doing everything quote unquote right. You know,
That's
it's just
crazy.
that's the way.
Have you seen that a bunch? Have you seen someone that's diet is good and they kind of move around? I'm not saying work out every day, but like
All the
really move
time,
around.
all the
Yeah,
time,
and what is
all
it?
the
They just
time.
can't
All
lose
that,
weight, or they keep gaining weight. What is it?
yeah. Well, it depends. More of it. Well, I would say that some of them can't lose weight. Some of them gain
Hmm.
weight, but like again, and that's it's sort of why I used to tell. I have lots of great stories of people calling me a monster for offering surgery for weight loss in children, which we can come back. We can talk about that at
Yeah.
some other episode when you want to have an episode on like worst stories of my career, but or
Please,
best
I would
stories.
love that.
But I used to tell that like the haters, I'd say, listen, just spend a day in my clinic and actually talk to these children who come in to see me. They're like 15-year-olds who are on the soccer team and who don't eat terrible. And they're on their high school soccer team, but they're like the goalie or the center back because they're too big to play some other position where they can run up and down the field as easily. And, they're not eating at McDonald's 5 times a week. And they're not sitting on their butt playing video games all day, every day, which is what everybody thinks of
Yeah.
kids who have obesity.
Yeah.
And yes, there are some people who aren't exercising, and there are some people
Yeah.
who aren't eating right. But I've
Yeah.
also seen the people who are totally doing everything they're supposed to do,
Yeah.
and they still either can't lose weight or just kept gaining weight. And, so it's
So
just,
how
again,
does so
it's
how
just
does
not
so how does
simple.
and maybe hopefully let's see if you could try to if it's a little bit too long of an answer, detailed of a question, and you could just tell me. But if that's the case, then how do drugs like Ozempic or whatever work in successfully having a physical impact? Because if it is genetic, or if if other things don't seem to be working that do work for other people, then what works about the drugs that the other stuff can't touch really?
Right. So the simplistic. So I've had patients who I've offered a sleeve gastrectomy to, where I tell them I'm going to take out 80 to 90% of your stomach. They will say to me, but doc, I already eat like almost nothing, so I don't understand how this surgery is going to help me. And it's obviously a legitimate question. But with surgery, there are all these other hormones that regulate your metabolism that are impacted. And actually, again, we talked about the gut-brain axis a little bit. There is probably direct gut-brain axis changes in the hypothalamus that change your weight set point. Because the body does what's called something called metabolic adaptation, where if you lose weight, your body will react by slowing down your metabolism because it doesn't want you to lose too much weight. It thinks you're like starving or dying, so it'll slow down the metabolism to keep you from losing more weight. And the same thing actually happens in the other direction in a short term, like a short term experiment, like the guy who did Super Size Me. If you like try to gain weight intentionally, your body will speed up its metabolism because it wants you to stay within a fairly narrow range.
Oh,
And it may be
interesting.
that the ultra-processed foods are impacting obesity rates by changing your hypothalamic set point, where people set points are being artificially elevated.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother
My
complicated issue.
brother-in-law, who's in high
But
school, is very focused on working out, and his friends call it dirty weight, what is it called, dirty weight gaining, where like in order to bulk up, dirty bulking, in order to get bigger, if they're scrawny kids, they eat a lot of garbage food, and they
yeah,
get big on purpose, and then they work out, and they work out like crazy, and then they kind of sculpt that into whatever they want. But I can't imagine that's very
yeah.
good for you either, right?
No, and that's actually not going to work long term either. There were actually studies back in the early 2000s where, and this is talking about things that could never be done again today, but there was a study where they had inmates at some prison intentionally gain like 20 pounds. Like they just fed them 24/7 until they gained weight. And then when they stopped feeding them like that and just like let them go back to their natural eating habits, they all came back down to their starting weight. Because that's what your body wants to do. Your body wants you to be at whatever weight it thinks you should be at, for better or worse. But so the drugs, again, like, so if you don't, let's say you exercise and you don't eat a lot, yet you're still struggling with weight, I think the medications sort of can do some of the same stuff that the surgery does in terms of changing your metabolism, certainly changes your food preferences, certainly gets rid of like food noise. So even if you are eating some, if you have some unhealthy foods mixed in with your healthy eating, because no one's perfect, it certainly limits that. But yeah, I mean, it's why obesity is such a complex and interesting disease, because if it was just purely eat less and exercise more and you'll lose weight, then that should work for everybody. And it actually works for almost nobody. So it's just it's why it's super interesting to me, because it's a completely unsolved mystery. And I think it makes it more interesting to me that, because I'm from New Jersey and I like to pick fights with people, I think it makes it more interesting for me, because I think everybody else has it wrong. Like, I think the rest of the world, not the rest of the world, but most people, especially the people who are in power these days, they have it wrong. So it's like super interesting and then super important, because they're sort of gaslighting the country by telling people this, and it's just not accurate.
Right.
And that's just not just RFK and HHS and Callie Means or whoever, Casey Means, whichever Means it is. But it's also like all the online influencers and like, again, even some medical professionals who will tell their patients, if you just, lifestyle medicine docs or the food is medicine people, they're also gaslighting patients to a degree, because, again,
because we don't know what it is.
Well, there's hard science that shows that it doesn't work. There's hard science that shows that diet and exercise.
Well, it doesn't work for everyone, we said, right?
Right. Well, so in the most intense behavioral lifestyle treatment programs, you lose about 5 to 7% of your body weight. So I shouldn't say it doesn't work, but because it works, you lose 5 to 7%. But that's not enough for most people with obesity. And even the weight loss medications that, the reason there was so much excitement about them is that you lose closer to 15 to 20%, really 10 to 15%, let's say. Surgery is a minimum of 20% or more. So that's why if you have obesity, so if you weigh 300 pounds, 5% of your body weight is 6 pounds. So at the end of your intensive lifestyle treatment, you'll weigh 294. And that's not really right. Is that right? No, that's not right. The math's wrong. 300, what did I say, 5%? 15 pounds. So you weigh 285. But
if you have 300 pounds, right. Well, okay, and I guess this would be, I should have actually opened with this question, but I guess I'll close with it. What's the definition of obese versus overweight?
I
really should have opened with that.
Yeah, that's okay. You can put it in the front. You can always put it in the front of the podcast. But and I have to correct you, because you shouldn't use obese as an adjective, because we're moving away from, it's called patient first language. So rather than say someone is obese, you should say
someone suffers from obesity.
Yeah, someone who has obesity, right? Because you don't want to call someone a diabetic anymore. You want to call them a person with diabetes, because it's more, you don't want to define people by their disease.
I see. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so, yes, absolutely.
So anyway, that's just the preferred language for all diseases.
The nomenclature.
Yeah.
Right.
And interestingly, the autism community is the one sort of...
Yeah, that's right.
They don't want that. They want to be called autistic. They don't want to be called someone with autism, which is weird. But whatever. Again, patient advocates, patients should be able to do whatever they want. So there is a medical definition of overweight and obesity. And actually, the definition of obesity is still being debated, and there's recent debate over the diagnosis of obesity and how one should define it. But right now, we use BMI, which is a ratio of your weight to height, and their cutoffs. So what is it? 18 to 25 is normal weight. BMI of 25 to 30 is overweight. 30 and above is obesity. And then there are different classes of obesity when you get to 35 and 40 and 45 and 50.
I see.
But the reality is that BMI is a surrogate. It doesn't really necessarily tell you. Like, you could be a very muscular person. You could be a bodybuilder and have almost 0% body fat. But by BMI, you'd probably be classified in the obesity range because...
Oh, fascinating.
Because you've got so much muscle mass. So
right.
it's just a proxy, and it's a screening tool. But, and that's why there's so much argument about whether or not, what really truly defines obesity. And I like to joke that, similar to autism spectrum disorder, that we should change the name of obesity to something like weight gain spectrum disorder, because like, it's just not one disease. Most likely, it's probably a lot of different quote unquote diseases that just look the same at the end of the day.
Oh, fascinating! Right.
We call it a phenotype, which is how something looks, but it comes from different genotypes. Genotypes are how things like come to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
That's so interesting. Wow, that's so fascinating. We should come up with that. I think that's the point. That's the point of language. And that's the point of vocabulary. Is like that specific words encompass specific contexts. And
the F word, fat, now has negative connotations because you call someone fat. Oh, you're fat, and that's negative. But fat just started as a way to describe adipose tissue. Like, adipose tissue is fat. There's brown fat and there's white fat.
Right.
So it didn't always start as a negative.
Well, of course. So people do with it. Right.
So it's sort of obesity is the same.
That's why I think that changing the term doesn't necessarily help, because if people are going to just use a different term to be just as derogative, then I think we have to just stop being derogative. That might help.
If it's weight gain spectrum disorder, so WGSD, they'll just change those initials. They'll say, like, they'll just make it into, like,
they'll just sprout a new word that we'll see floating around on the internet.
But WGSD will be it'll be stand for white guy with serious diameter. There it is. Yeah. So that's what they're gonna they'll just change it into something into something mean or whatever.
Right.
That's just what we do, unfortunately. But,
well, not in this podcast, I guess.
I do think there, I don't know what there's obviously the Joe Rogans in the world who sort of made their podcast world from being controversial and argumentative and frankly sometimes being mean or not necessarily positive. And I actually think it's kind of like I'm trying to just do the opposite. I figure and maybe I'll get nowhere because maybe no one will want to listen to me unless I start to be, calling people.
I don't think that. I don't. Yeah. But yeah.
It's just I have to hope that if just enough people in medicine and in other fields just get out there and just start speaking truths. And stop with all the opinion and all the hoopla and all the whatever. That maybe that'll help get the world back to sort of some sense of normalcy. I don't even need it to be a perfect world. I just need it to be like a relatively normal and stable world where you can predict what the next day is gonna mean or what the next political movement's gonna mean. You don't have to worry about all kinds of I don't think anybody who grew up post Roe v. Wade actually thought there would be a day where it would get reversed. I don't think anybody ever even contemplated that could happen, but that's where we are. It's just, it's just, the world is just, whatever.
The world, it's a pendulum. Everything's a pendulum. Yeah. It just keeps on swinging in different directions, and the only thing that I'm kind of hoping for is that it doesn't swing so wildly, and that the motions are a little bit less volatile. Right. Well, that if it is going to be a pendulum, then it shouldn't. It should be a clock going from 7 to 5 instead of 10 to 2,
Right, exactly. Or like a metronome, where at
Yeah.
least, like it goes back and forth, but it goes back and forth in a more predictable pattern. And again, with not such wide variation with each movement back and forth. But
Yeah. Well, anyway, doctor, I really appreciate the time. This is really awesome. Maybe
my
we'll do.
pleasure.
I would love actually to do a part 2 of your horror stories. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But until then, this was really great. I'm so happy I'm happy we made this work last minute. But thank you so much
Yeah.
for the time. This
Yeah, my
is
pleasure.
really enlightening and a lot of fun, and I think
Yeah.
really, really interesting and really informative. So
Yeah. It's always fun to chat with,
yeah,
again, it's like anyone who's open minded and wants to have a discussion about almost any topic. It can be super fun and interesting and informative. Like we don't have to agree with everything.
Yeah.
We just need to
Just have a
listen
good
to
time.
people and talk about it and have fun and not get so worked up if people don't agree or whatever. But yeah, happy to come back and let me know.
Yes,
Let me
absolutely.
know, and I'll make it happen.
Doctor, thank you so much. It's such a
Uh,
pleasure. Have a great
my
day. All
pleasure.
right, take
You
care.
too.
Thank you. Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Bye bye.